Hi, welcome to Kev's Crafty Corner. Today a quick intro into Inkscape, just for a feel of how it works and the things that are around the screen and what they do. So with no further ado, let's move into Inkscape. And here we are. Now when you first open it up, it's going to look a bit daunting because there's a lot of things going on around that screen, but don't be worried. Most of them we'll never use, but let's look at the things that you will need to look at. First of all, hopefully your screen will look a bit like this. You may well have the menu bar across the top. Mine hides because I'm on a Mac and I've got it to set to full screen so that you can see as much of it as possible. So we will need the menu bar occasionally, but we'll go to that as and when we need it. So this is the view, which is a default view. So let's move up to the menu bar, look at view, click on that, and then come down and make sure you have these settings. You need to make sure that default is ticked at the bottom. That makes sure that the screen looks the same as mine. And then in the show and hide, make sure at least the rulers are selected, but if everything's ticked, that's fine. Because the rulers is the important one. The rulers being these guides that's across and the side of the screen. Now all of this big white area is your drawing board, and this in the middle is the page, and that page size at the moment is set to A4, and we can change that. And the simplest way to change that is to come up to this tool here and we'll make some changes. But let me first of all explain what these things are. So down the left hand side we have the various tools that you use for your drawing. This top section, these icons allow you to do various options. This middle section here will show you various values depending on what tool you've selected and other options that you have available, which I'll explain those as we go along. And then down the right hand side, these are the snapping tools, and again we'll explain how those work in a little bit. On the bottom we have a line of colour swatches, and these we can select very easily as we're drawing, and this bar here allows us to scroll the colours across. There are other ways of getting to these colours. Now this real bottom section here, this is information, and this tells us what sort of object we've got selected. It will tell us what layer we're working with, whether the objects are locked, whether they're in view. And on this side here, this X and Y shows us where the cursor is relative to your drawing board, which is also relative to the ruler. Now the rulers will set to 0, 0 point on this corner of the page, and then it's a minus if you're that side of the page and a plus if you're that side of the page. X relates to going across the screen and Y relates to going down, and it's quite easy to remember. X is across and Y has a little line at the bottom of the capital letter Y pointing downwards. The Z equals the zoom, and that's the zoom relative to your page. So let's first of all start by looking at how we change our page size. So we come to this icon here, which is edit properties of this document. Now if you notice, when you hover your mouse over any of the options, the tools, whatever it is, a black box will pop up and tell you what that particular tool or option is going to do for you. Also you'll notice when you're there, like that says zoom to fit drawing window 4, that the 4 in brackets, or in this case here Shift Command T, means the keyboard shortcut to get to that particular tool or facility. That's align and distribute, which is quite useful to remember some of these keyboard shortcuts because it does make life quicker when you're working on a project. So let's click on this one, and this will bring us this Documents Properties box, and if you notice again, it's telling us what the keyboard shortcut is. Now I'm working on a Mac, and that symbol is the command button on the keyboard, which is next to the space bar. On a Windows machine, that'll be your control key, but it'll tell you in the shortcuts depending on which operating system you're working on. So let's have a look down here. So this display units, we can change between millimeters, pixels, inches, millimeters, centimeters. I'm not too sure what the other ones are. I generally work in millimeters because I prefer it. I can work more accurately. This is telling us our page size. So our page is selected to A4, but you can select A0. And if you look in the background, you'll see the size of the page border is changing as I click on the appropriate box. If you want to change to a manual size, say you want to set it to be the size of your mat for your cricket, which is 305 by 305 millimeters, you can do that here. So you can highlight the number that's already in there, type in the one you want, hit your tab key, move over to the other size, enter, and there you are. And you can see now that page has changed to be 305 by 305 millimeters. You can work in inches if you want. You can change between portrait and landscape. So there's quite a bit you can do on here. If you don't want the page border to be there, so you're working on something and you don't want to be hindered by that background, you can simply turn it off so you can't see it. The rulers will still be relative to a page, but you just won't see it. So I'll put that back on and we're back to, because we've selected a custom size here, if I click on one, click back, we'll now go back to our A4. So if you highlight it, that's the size it is, and you can change around as we showed you there. You can set other things up with this as well, but we'll just stick to the document properties for the moment. So that's that one. And of course now we've gone to landscape mode because I ticked the box. So let's put it back to portrait mode and come out of there. Lovely. Now at the moment that page isn't taking full advantage of the drawing screen that we've got available, and it's telling us it's only a 35% zoom. Now we can change that quite easily. Up here we've got zoom tools. So zoom to fit selection in window, zoom to fit drawing to window, zoom to fit page to window. Now that's the one we're interested in. That's number 5 on the keyboard, but I'll just press that there now. I'm already there, and you can see now our page zooms up to take up full advantage of the screen. So let's actually put something on the screen on our drawing. Let's start with, say, a rectangle or a square. So we click on the rectangle or square box, and when I bring the mouse over now, you can see it's got a crosshair and it's got a black box by the side of it. If I click and draw, I'll be drawing a box, and there we have a nice box. Now you'll also notice as I was drawing that it had got around a slightly rounded corner, which you can see there, and it's telling me here that I've got a number in this box here. So across the top here we've now got, because I've selected a tool, I've now got the size of my rectangle in the width and the height. It's rounded corners relative to the horizontal scale, and it's rounded corner relative to the vertical scale. I don't want a rounded corner, so I can get rid of that in 2 ways. One, I can click on there and drag it up, and that's now gone to 0, and we've now got a rectangle. I could change the numbers here as well, which will do the same thing. These handles will allow me to move it around, and if I click off the square, so I go to this tool here, which is select and transform objects, which is S on the keyboard. If I click that, I've now got this. Our display across the top has changed, as you'll notice now. Because I'm in the selection tool, it's telling me this corner here is in the X position and the Y position, so that's across and down relative to the page, remember. It's width that way, height that way of course, and it's unlocked. So as I'm moving these around, it's going to change the size relative to how I move my mouse. If I put the lock on, I will then move proportionally. So it locks it, and I can't now move it around in a stupid way. So that's what those do. Now do you notice that's white inside, there's no fill? And there's also no stroke as well showing. Oh, there is, sorry, there is a stroke showing. So I can't select it by clicking inside the box. I need to actually pick up on the stroke. If I want to fill colour in that box, I simply come down here and choose one. And whichever colour I click on will change the fill colour. Nice and easy. Just like that. One of the other things you've got as well is opacity. What's that mean? Well, you can make it so you can see through the box. At the moment we're set to 100%, here's our opacity. But if I click on the minus button and turn it down, you'll notice that box is going grayer because the fill is going opaque. And I can show that better if I make a duplicate of this, and I can do that by right clicking and go duplicate. I can also do Command D on my keyboard, but I can also come up to edit and duplicate will be there. So the edit gives you these options, the view gives you these options, and an object, which is anything that you've got on your screen that you're drawing with, is called an object. And if I touch the object box there, that will bring me up a little display window over here, which will tell me some information about my objects. Now I can make that so you can move it around like that. And that's telling me it's a rectangle. And that's the one in particular question. So I'm going to duplicate that. So Command duplicate. That doesn't look like it's done anything, but that's telling me I have another one there now. And if I change its colour, like that, so we now know we've got the two different ones. One's on top of the other. So if I just pull that one down a little bit, we'll see the second one behind it. Unlike Cricut Design Space, when you duplicate something and it offsets it, this doesn't. It puts your duplicate directly on top of the one that you've already got. So just to show you the effect of the opacity, I can do it here. And if I drag across, you can see now, you can view one through the other. It's quite useful when you're doing certain things. Okay, what else can you do with objects? Lots of things. One thing to remember though, if you want to edit that, by the way, if you just double click on it, it puts it back into the drawing mode with the create rectangles and squares. So I can now make this one have curly corners if I want. And that's how I get back to it. To get off that, you can go back over to your arrow up here, or just press the S key on your keyboard. And that will take you back to the selection tool. All very clever, isn't it? So if we do the same thing with circles, now if you notice the colour that that's filled it with is the same colour that we've got up here. It remembers the last colour that you're working with. Now down the bottom here, this information is telling me it's an ellipse. That is telling me it's a rectangle. That's telling me it's a rectangle down the bottom here. Now, it's important to remember that when you move to do things onto Design Space, they have to be paths. Otherwise it won't show up and you won't be able to do what you want to do, cut it, draw it, whatever. And it's very easy to sort that out. When you've done your drawing, you've finished doing everything you want to do with your rectangle that you think so, you need to convert that to a path. And it's very easy. We just come up to the path tool here, and the first one that you can select is Object to Path. And when you click on there, it now becomes a path. And you'll see down here it says Path 4 Nodes. And we'll know it is because if I select this tool here, which is Edit Paths by Nodes, you'll see now I've got 4 little rectangles on these corners, and these are the nodes. And with that, you can change and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. We'll cover that in another video later on. Just quickly, we'll show you how you do text, because that's always an interesting one. So we go to Text tool, again T on the keyboard, and that brings up our text entry facility. Click anywhere on your drawing screen and just type away. So let's put in some text. Now up here, you'll notice now we've got things relative to text. So we've got our font that we've selected. what type it's got. So if you've got variations on there which might be bold and narrow and that sort of thing, depending on the font, it will show up there as a drop down. I think this has only got normal to it. This is your font size. So if I change that to 20, I can change the font size quite easily. We've then got, if you're not sure what it is, just hold your mouse over the box and it will tell you what it is. So spacing between baselines. And then we've got our spacing between letters, the one we always like to play with. Spacing between words, horizontal kerning, vertical kerning, and if you're not sure what that is, that does all sorts of weird and wonderfuls, and character rotation. Now, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So what happens if we change that? Does it do anything? And it might not do when we've got a full word selected. Let's change that to 20 and just see if it does anything. No, it doesn't. Okay. Not sure, never played with that before, so it's interesting to see what it does. Put that back to 0 for now. And so there's lots of things on here which I don't really know what they do. I'm sure somebody with more experience will be able to tell us. So let's go back to selection. There we go. Oh, that's one thing you can't do is keyboard shortcuts when you're doing text, of course. So Inkscapes. Now, because I haven't got the lock selected, I can do all sorts of weird and wonderfuls with it. Okay, so that's text at the moment. Now, again, looking down the bottom, it says it's text. And if we bring that into Design Space, it won't know what to do with it. So we need to make that into a path. But it's important you do all the things you want to do with it first before you change it to a path, because then you can't actually change any of the text, any of the wordings. If you spelt things wrong, you can't change it once you've changed it to a path. So it might be worth doing a duplicate before you change it, or if you're totally happy with it, then that's fine. One thing you can do, which is quite easy to do as well, is you can add that to a path. So here we've got a circle. Let's make that circle a little bit bigger. Gosh, it's no longer a circle now, it's an ellipse, but that doesn't matter. So let me select the text, and then let me select by holding the shift key down and clicking on the ellipse, and I'm going to go to text, and I'm going to go to put on path. And you'll notice we now have our text on the path. So let's click off in a weird position because it's based on where the ellipse starts in terms of the path that's there, and it normally starts here. So if I select it and go to the node tool, you'll see there is the start of the path. So let's rotate that, and you can bring your text to be where you want it to be. And the way you get to the rotation tool is you click the object and it swaps between rotation and selection just by clicking on it. Once you're happy that you've got your text where you want it to be, you can then convert it to a path, and then you can remove the circle or the shape that you've attached your text to. If I was to try and remove the ellipse now, or if I do that, I'll delete it, you'll notice the text goes back to its normal shape. It's because it's still the text attached to that path. So I've waffled on enough for now. So I hope you found that interesting and useful.